There are cracks beginning to appear in the facade of Victorian Premier Dan Andrews, and his once seemingly impervious coat of Teflon is starting to weaken. Now, we might be premature in our thinking, but for the last couple of years, nearly every piece we here at the Informer have run about the Victorian government seems to have been spot on. The Informer has led much of the debate around issues where other media have either failed or refused to deal with. Issues like corruption, where News Corp, Fairfax and the national broadcaster, the ABC, are only now just starting to take up. But just as many media organisations are starting to follow up on what the Informer has been pursuing for some time, they have also failed to fulfil their responsibilities as the fifth estate. And that has brought about a loss of public confidence in the fifth estate, because the failure to hold the Victorian government has allowed corruption to run rife throughout the Victorian government. At IBAC, for all the questions raised about its failings to do what was mandated to do, is now fulfilling its role, even though it's choosing to hold secret grillings of the Premier. Questions last year were raised about whether it was genuinely independent, which reinforces the adage of perception is everything. Now, IBAC is beginning to drop the hammer on Andrews and the Victorian government, and the number of secret grillings conducted seem to suggest it is ramping up the pressure on Andrews. And Andrews is beginning to feel the heat. Regardless of support or criticism of IBAC just can't seem to make anyone happy. But that's a good sign, because it's a sign it's doing its job. Neither fear nor favour is how IBAC should and must be approaching its inquiries. And that's been highlighted by the raucous criticism it has received from the allegedly corrupt and former mayor of the city of Casey, Sam Aziz, for extracting capital punishment on one-time Liberal state candidate, Amanda Stapleton. Now, Stapleton sadly took her own life after receiving IBAC's draft findings into the suspected corruption of property developer John Woodman. Woodman donated almost $1 million to both Labor and the Liberals, but he denies any alleged wrongdoing raised by IBAC. Now, Stapleton was publicly grilled by IBAC for its Operation Sandon, unlike Andrews, who has been secretly questioned by IBAC's Operation Watts into allegations of Labor branch stacking and misuse of public funds. Now, regardless of whether Andrews is questioned secretly, he is now clearly in IBAC's sights, public or private, and the preference should always be for a public interrogation of Andrews for all of us to see. Andrews is definitely a person of interest to and someone who has serious questions to answer. The grilling of Andrews in private for Operation Sandon after Woodman paid $10,000 for an intimate lunch with Premier Andrews at a Chinese restaurant in 2017 may appear to smell, but does it really? One area ripe for future probes was suggested in email correspondence by IBAC's corruption prevention strategist, Karen Adams, in which Victoria's Departments of Treasury and Finance invited all registered government contractors to complete a survey run by polling group JWS Research. Now, while the research is not tied to any IBAC investigation yet, IBAC is clearly interested in how contract tenders are run and awarded by the state government or local councils. IBAC is obviously now digging for information around how often public servants are demanding gifts, cash, or any benefits from private sector suppliers. Now, this is an issue the Informer has wondered about for considerable time. IBAC is also keen to understand whether government agencies are doling out unequal information to different tender applicants and whether confidential tender information is being leaked to preferred suppliers and whether some suppliers are being unfavourably awarded contracts. Now, Victoria's Auditor General has had a lot to say about this. Government tenders, after it investigated 4 Andrews government contracts worth more than $100 million. The report came about based on referrals to the Auditor General from the opposition. This included an $86.4 million contract for hotel quarantine medical services awarded to On-Site Doctor Proprietary Limited. Now, it's an entity registered by Melbourne GP Nathan Pinkskier, 8 days after the health department asked him for advice on finding doctors to staff the program. Now, Pinkskier's brother is also an on-site doctor director who just happened to be a former vice president of the Victorian Labor Party and whose daughter was employed as an advisor to the Premier. It's a fascinating time to be observing Victorian politics and the machinations that are now taking place. Just earlier this week, it was announced former Commonwealth and New South Wales Ombudsman John McMillan has been appointed to lead an Ombudsman investigation into allegations that Victoria's public service has been stacked with government cronies. It's just another sign that there is no one in Victoria that seems to be able to be trusted to run an investigation into the operations of the public service and the perceived corruption riddled within it. The perception now is that Andrews has tainted cronies everywhere. A message now beginning to resonate loud and clear. I Cook Foods, the red shirt scandal, branch stacking, the Western Roads upgrade, the 58 workplace safety breaches, the firefighter saga, and the list goes on. Victoria is a mess, and it's a political hotbed of corruption as it appears. And the time has come for Andrews and his cronies to go. And now we may just have to wait until November 22, and that, well, should be the time.